Good Monday afternoon. This is a football show presented by Sinkers Beverages and the Kingston Group, two great local and amazing sponsors here on the show. My name is Braden Gall. He is Zach Lyons, and welcome to the comment section today. There you go, Donnie D. That's right, iconic intro music. That is by Moon Taxi, by the way. Shout out to our great and amazing friends, Moon Taxi, also local musicians here in Nashville. We have a lot to discuss today on the pod, Zach. A 20-16 loss on the road, third straight road loss, 2-3 for the Tennessee Titans. There's a lot to discuss about the defense. There's a lot to discuss about the front seven. I have a lot to say about the linebackers. There's lots to say about the secondary. There's lots to say about the usage rate of the skill weapons. Also, there's just a whole it's on fire.
Yeah, what do you have over there? What's going on over there?
I'm trying to like Ace Ventura all the demons out of the show here, and out of my chest, by the way. So yes, my office is in fact on fire, Stoney. So Moon Taxi is cool. That's right. I'm ashamed to admit that I've been to like 35 shows. So they're really, really great dudes.
Damn.
And they do a lot to support local charities in this town. So support Moon Taxi, just like Sinkers Beverages and the Kingston Group, Stacking the Inbox, Football and Other F Words, all the other great shows across the 440 Sports Network. Zach, I guess we have a lot we're going to get into from a detail standpoint, but like I just can't remember a game playing out like this for the Tennessee Titans, or really for many teams at all. Very few possessions, extremely long drives. I mean, like, you look at the numbers and you can kind of you find one thing that you're like, oh, that's why the Titans didn't win, or that's why they were in this situation, red zone offense, for example. But then you look at the defense and you go, oh, they stopped the Colts in the red zone a lot of times as well. And then you go, but the defense wasn't good. But they were like, it's just one of the weirdest games. I don't know if they deserve to win at all, and we'll get to some of the main reasons. But just
you know why they didn't deserve to win? Because they didn't win. I mean, to me, that should tell you everything in this team is that the Saints game and the Colts game, they were and are the better team, but I feel like they got caught in the 1 out of 10 matchups where they're going to lose. Like, if they played the Saints 10 times, I think the Titans are winning about like 80% of them, right? Like, if they played the Colts 10 times this year, they're probably winning 80%. This happened just to be the one fluke, and there are distinct people that you can blame for each loss.
Yeah, there's a lot. So it's interesting. Like, I think week one, you could say maybe that was just the way Ryan Tannehill's season was going to start. Like, it was week one, new offense, new players, pretty tough environment. Maybe it didn't matter who they played. I would argue the environment and the defense for the Saints probably had a major factor in all of that, but it just clearly his head wasn't there. He's shaking that off, and yesterday was almost 8 yards per attempt. Didn't have a turnover until basically the last play of the game. Put his team in the red zone a number of times. They moved the ball pretty well. So I'm not, Tannehill's not really even in the conversation for people to be blamed in all of this. First and foremost, it is, I don't, how about this? Which part of the defense do you want to start with?
Oh, well, I guess we should just get rid of Christian Fulton out of the way, just in case his dad has somewhere to be and he's watching the show,
Well, no, he'd get kicked out. Wherever you put him, he's going to get kicked out. So,
yeah, I mean, like, talk about a family filled with better defenders than the son on the field. I mean, they are they are out there defending every tweet out there. And that's something that I wish Christian Fulton would have picked up on so he could defend some of the players instead of allowing Josh Downs, 4.99 yards of separation, because he continues to keep looking in the backfield, even though he has been named every week that Christian Fulton has to quit looking in the backfield. Christian Fulton has to quit looking in the backfield. Christian Fulton has to keep looking in the back, stop looking in the backfield.
Yeah.
And he keeps on doing it. So I don't know if he just doesn't care, just literally can't. I don't understand what is going on with Christian Fulton, but at this point, much like Andre Dillard, he does not have to be played for this team to be somewhat competitive.
I guess I found myself thinking that in the second half. The pass interference penalty wasn't really his fault, but it was in such a critical situation, and you're not going to get that call when you made so many mistakes throughout the course of the game. At one point, he got, like, when Zach Moss goes down late in the game, he picks up a pretty long run right before the 2-minute warning, and he goes down, and Jeffrey Simmons dives in to tackle Zach Moss, and he gets hit by Jeffrey Simmons. And it's like even Christian Fulton is hit by his own players at some point. And so it just at one time on that drive, they had a close up of his face, and like I was genuinely concerned for his mental state. Like he looked beaten down mentally, and like he didn't know what. Not that he didn't know what he was doing, which I think is we could say, but like it just. I was like kind of like I felt bad for the guy at one point. Like I don't know. I think we can talk about him. I think the middle linebackers were as big of an issue, if not a bigger issue.
I hate to be right, but I told everybody the Jack Gibbons days are over because he hit his 4-game limit of having good games, and it's over. And everybody was way too quick to jump on the bandwagon of a undrafted free agent, unathletic linebacker,
Yeah.
but nobody wants to listen. They just like, oh, Jack Gibbons, what a great story. Oh, Dr. Gibbons. People love stories and nostalgia over production.
True. A lot of you guys in the comments are very active. So Pretty Boy Lift Shit says Will Levis should be brought in the red zone. Not on that plane. I'm not on that train yet. Tim Kelly needs to figure out his red zone play calling. I don't know. He had a couple of really nice play calls. The last one was a big problem. But the Derrick Henry throw, for example, was a pretty brilliant play call that should have worked. DeAndre Hopkins should have gotten his feet down. Ed Henry, I think this is going to be a major topic today. Ed Henry, to me, it appears for the first time under Mike Vrabel that this team lacked focus and discipline. We'll get to that in general, and I think that's a really important point and an observation, Ed, I think that I kind of agree with, because Mike Vrabel's demeanor on the sideline in the fourth quarter is and kind of throughout the whole game. I don't want to read too much into it, but it's unlike anything I've seen before from him. I just even 16 seconds are ticking down, and he has no sense. He's just like.
He was very stoic.
He's just like watching, like,
yeah,
like what do we do? So we'll get to that. I think the problem is right on the 56-yard run by Zach Moss that ended up breaking the game open and kind of scoring the touchdown. You got to give a lot of credit to the Colts interior offensive line. That trio was really, really good. They did almost all their damage in the A and B gaps. And the only time you ever saw Gibbons or Al-Shaair make contact with the running back was like 4, 5, 6 yards downfield almost every time.
They were getting washed out of plays by the guard because there's no Tier Tart, right? Like when you don't have
True.
And I mean, when
your
guard
is getting to the second level every time.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. If your guard is getting to the second level, which in like a second, like it wasn't. Basically, what happened is ball snap. Quentin Nelson or whoever the other guard is, I think it's Will Freeze is the other guard. And then engaged with the linebacker quicker than I've seen a Titans defense ever allow that to happen. And it's not because they were in technically bad positions. I think the guard just moved them out of the way because that's what guards are supposed to do. But you're also supposed to have a game plan to prevent the guard or chip the guard or take up the guard's, attention.
Attack.
Yeah. Like, I mean, I know Tier Tart is really good in the run game, but this was just pathetic. And I don't think the offense should be out of the hook. But if I'm playing the blame game, I'm going defense, a heavy 75%, maybe more, in the offense for 25% or maybe less, depending on where I land on the defense. I know everybody's like, well, people are throwing out stats comparing Marcus to Ryan Tannehill in their first 4 games or first 5 games. People are throwing out a lot of nuance because and I'm with them. I've been like this. Ryan Tannehill's not the problem, even though people want to say he is or allude that he is. But the problem is it doesn't matter. He's not the problem. There's nothing exciting about this team. They make watching football miserable every week,
especially after like one of the most entertaining games they've ever played in the history of their franchise last week.
They just make it all so difficult, though. Like even in their wins, everything is difficult.
Yeah. And I think the thing I see, and this is not about Tannehill because we'll get to the offense in a little bit, because I agree it's an exclusive to me. It's exclusively like if a team is going to line up with their backup quarterback and their backup running back, and they're going to run between the guards, not between the tackles, between the guards. You know how hard that is, and just physically dominate you the entire game. That's about you. And yes, it's about Tart, but it's about Jeffrey Simmons. It's about the linebackers. It's about the safeties not rolling up. At that play, I watched that play, that 56-yard play. They had, at the time of the ball that was snapped, they had 8 guys in the box because the corner was rolled up on the line of scrimmage, and they didn't touch him. They did not touch him. And so I'm with you on Gibbons. We said it on Thursday. I said this is the biggest test for the linebackers, in part because we thought the combination of Richardson, Taylor, and how well they can really stress you in space was going to be the problem. No, they didn't even have to do that. It was Gardner Minshew handing off to Zach Moss right up the middle the entire game. And again, the offensive line was great for the Colts. So you got to give them credit. The secondary is a part of this. They're not making plays when they need to. That's been the case the entire season, but that's not the reason they lost the game. And again, they got stops in the red zone. Colts were 1 of 5 in the red zone. 1 of 5. And of course, the Colts gave you one there at the end of the first half. But this is where Ed's question comes in. And it comes in the second half of the Cleveland Browns game where we question sort of heart's not the right word, but just like, are you still in this shit all the way? Like, to your point, like this team has played hard games for years. It's Vrabel asks them to play a certain style, and they've had to grind every win for years. And it looks like it's finally taken a toll on a front seven that just got pushed around for the first time that I can remember in a long, long time.
Yeah, yesterday, I thought the Browns loss was like the worst team loss in the Vrabel era. I think yesterday's loss is the most maddening. Like, I think I'm not mad and angry. I'm just like, I'm frustrated at what I am watching because I know this team can be coached better, can play better, and I hate using coach better, play better, but that's kind of the only words you can use in that sentence. I just felt like this team. Here's the thing. The offense showed plenty of fight. Now, they failed, and we'll talk about their failures later, but they showed life. They showed fight. This Tennessee Titans team, after that 56-yard run, seemed like it just gave up. Like, this defense, for whatever reason, has shown multiple times that if things just don't go perfectly in, like, the first quarter, they are just going to kind of check out of the game. And I think it's weird because we've never seen that, but maybe we just kind of put it off to the side last year and classified it as a weird 7-game losing streak that had a lot of injuries. But maybe there is some growing unrest. Like, I feel like we're coming close, and I put this in an article at stackingtheinbox.com. I feel like we're coming close to seeing the headlines players only meeting.
Yeah.
I just, for some reason, I just feel like it's coming down the pipe. They're making this,
to Jesus.
Yeah, they're making this weird choice to not go on to London, even though Baltimore, your opponents, have already left, which is again creating your own competitive disadvantage for no fucking reason. I'm having a hard time as the weeks go by classifying the losing streak as just a fluke because we're seeing evidence of that same team still existing in 2023. Like, there's a lot.
Okay. I see.
2022, there seems like there's a lot of carryover attitude-wise, and it's translating on the field. And what's weird is that I don't feel like the offense is any kind of semblance of the offense that Vrabel has preached about, right? Doesn't it seem the offense is more modern? It is trying to score points. It is going through the air. That's where it's finding its most success more often than not is through the air. It's not ground or pound. And yet it feels like everybody's kind of not seeing that, and they're just thinking it's all the same old Titans. It's just,
well,
I don't know.
Donnie says, I blame the offense more because we should be able to score 24 points. And while that sentence is correct in the second half that they should be able to score more than 24 points. It's the NFL. To me, the offense again wasn't necessarily the problem. Can we talk about the red zone play calling and the red zone offense and maybe how they're using some players? Like Tajay Spears, I think after the touchdown run had like 2 total touches in the entire most of the second half of the game. Could you use him a little bit more? They certainly used DeAndre Hopkins very well. They went to Josh Wiley on a 4th down late in the game. Like, they threw the ball to Chig. The offensive line didn't do its job. I think, even though it protected Tannehill in the passing game because they went heavy play action, they didn't exactly open up a lot of lanes, despite the fact that Leonard and Pay didn't play for Indianapolis, which is the real concern.
Well, and the lanes they opened, Henry just fucking missed them.
Right.
Henry spent most of his day up the ass of some offensive lineman for no fucking reason.
We'll get to we both have things to add to the offense, of course. So let's stay on the defense here because I do think, to your point about the players only, I think if you put yourself into the head and mind of a lot of those defensive players, the guys who've been around a while, not Alshire and Gibbons, but like Byard didn't make a ton of plays yesterday. Amani Hooker didn't make a ton of plays. Jeffrey Simmons didn't make a ton of plays. You start, you add up all the guys that have been around. Fulton was terrible. He's been around for a while. They also have been carrying this team for years, right? Like for 2.5 plus, maybe 3 years now, not 2019, some of 2020, but like each of the last 2 seasons, any time they win a game, it's because of the defense. And that has to have take a toll on your mental state as a team when you go into every football game putting your body on the line to be as physical as possible for this defense that carries teams, to know that like there's a chance the offense could screw it up. That's not even fair this year because the offense looks modernized. They're throwing on first down. They're using play action. They're using motion. They're using empty sets. They're doing all the things that you want to see. I just can't remember the last time a team lined up with a backup. I know Gardner Minshew's not an average backup quarterback. He's played a lot of football in the last few years for a backup. And Zach Moss is not your average backup running back. He's been productive most of the season in place of Jonathan Taylor. But for the most part, with a defense like that, if you line up against a backup quarterback and a backup running back, you can't just let them hit you in the face over and over and over and over and over again and do nothing about it. That is unlike anything we've seen from a Titans defense. And there's not any fixes here, guys. Like there's not some like Caleb Farley's not going to save the day. Like there's not like this is not there. This is, and I think Herndon was talking about this on Twitter, of course. Like the trade deadline's not till the 31st of October, I believe. There's in no way, shape, or form should this team be a buyer. There's in no way. And we'll have more time to talk about this, but you don't go trade for a corner. You're not going and trading for a middle linebacker, although trading for a middle linebacker might actually be very cheap. But like this is they're a couple of losses away here from selling pieces, if they have any to sell, than they are from buying stuff. So I don't know what the solution is here on the defense, other than to rally the troops, circle the wagons, players only meeting, blah 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 blah. Like I don't know I have no answers, because you can't get punked by the Colts offensive line and Zach Moss and Gardner Minshew and have much to say about it afterward.
Yeah, it's just, it's been terrible. As far as what the defense has shown, because the defense is supposed to be the linchpin of this whole team. And that's what everybody expected. The top unit was always going to be the defense. And everybody's like, well, the offense, we don't know what the offense is going to be. Not sure if the offense is going to be any good. And the offense has shown that it can be good, and the defense has shown it can be really, really bad. And it dates back to even week 1. I mean, for all the talk about Ryan Tannehill, what was the other thing that we talked about? Was how the run defense got gashed by Jamal Williams at the worst possible time, and how Rashid Shaheed blew right past Christian Fulton. And what
sounds familiar.
What are we talking about 4 weeks later? I mean, we're talking about the same thing, and we talk about the same thing in every loss. I mean, you got Pierre Strong going crazy, and I say crazy. He got 6 carries, but he got really yards per attempt and critical first downs for the Browns that kept the defense on there. And it's Pierre fucking Strong. I mean, it's not anybody crazy. Mixon was eating up chunk yardage. You can come out and say, well, they haven't allowed 100 yards rushing or 100 yards to a team and blah, 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 all these stats. But it's because teams kind of abandon the run at some point and start going to passing because they know that Christian Fulton is. And then yesterday, the Colts won how the Titans want to win. Yeah. They bullied the opposing team at the trenches, and they stuck with the run game. And even if you take away the 56-yard run, he still got like 5.9 yards per touch and all this stuff. And he still had a good day, even without that big long run. Yeah.
Bad angles, bad tackling.
It was everything. I mean, it was everything. They were hapless. Like, now, and I meant to change the thing here, but the hapless Titans lose to the Colts. You could say hapless, effortless, meaningless. It felt like, I mean, lifeless. It was just all kinds of lists.
I do find it interesting that so many of you guys in the comments are still kind of asking about the offense. And again, we'll get to that. But because again, I think when you look at the way that they ran the football, 13 carries, 43 yards for Derrick Henry, 7 for 34 for Spears, but 19 of that came on one. So that was 20 carries for 77 yards, but with like 20 of that coming on one carry, basically 57 yards on 19 carries. That's not exactly doing the job either on the offensive side of the ball. They didn't run the ball well. And again, that's without their best linebacker and their best pass rusher in the game for the majority of for the entire game. So I do want to get to the offense, but again, there's no fixes from the depth at middle linebacker, which we talked about. There's no fixes for the cornerback situation. They did go sign some pass rusher today, some guy. They went and got some defensive lineman.
Yeah.
But they got punked, man. And I assume, and this speaks to the way this team always has functioned under Vrabel, just like they did after the worst loss in franchise history or Vrabel history. They come back and they played very well against the Bengals. I expect them to come back and play pretty well against the Ravens. And so this roller coaster we're on might just
be technically a home game.
This is the way that people need to get used to this team. And I have a theory I'm going to float to you on the offensive side of the ball, but I think this is the ride you're on this year, guys. Like I had them at 8-9. You might have had them at 9-8. Maybe they win the division. Maybe they don't. Maybe they're going to be good one day and maybe they're going to be bad the next. But this is the roller coaster we bought tickets for. And this is what they're going to do. Let me tell you guys about Sinkers and Kingston Group first. Let's lighten the mood a bit before we talk offense, because the game was terrible, but our sponsors are great. Sinkers, of course, #1 liquor store in the entire city last year, Zach, the defending champs, as voted on by you, according to the Nashville scene. You can search Uber Eats, and if you need a beverage, which I'm assuming most of you do after watching the game, you can just search Uber Eats, Sinkers Beverages right there, and they'll have the booze, whatever you want, delivered directly to your house.
They'll drive so you can drink.
Great bourbon selection. Sign up for the in-crowd. Absolutely wonderful helping staff there. They'll pick out everything you need. If you need some help with wine, like I do, I'm not good with picking out the wines because I don't know anything about tannins, and whatever else happens in the glass when you put the wine in there. I don't know. I know a lot about bourbon. They know a lot about bourbon. They got great tequila selection, which I'm kind of starting to come around on with tequila. I'm starting to explore tequila, which is a dangerous hobby to have. But Sinkers Beverages has a great selection there and a great selection of all kinds of cool frosty beverages. Great walk-in freezer there with all kinds of beers. And the Kingston Group, buildkg.com. You guys know the drill. Nashville's locally owned custom home and remodeling firm. Just give them a call. Talk to them about design. Talk to them about renovations. Talk to them about buying or selling. A lot of different things they can help you with your house. They don't expect you to use them for everything, but just keep that name up there in the noggin, the Kingston Group. And if you need anything with your house, just make sure you remember that name and talk to them, have a conversation. So my theory on the offense is I think they have some things in place that I really, really like. There's Mike Vrabel, of course, raving about Tajay Spears. I like Spears. I think they should have used him more. I like the scheme. I think Tim Kelly's doing a pretty good job. I think Peter Skoronski back in the lineup at left guard. I think he's going to be a pretty good player for this franchise for a long time. I'd love to see Treylon Burks back out on the field, but I think they've got some nice things to work with. My theory is that Ryan Tannehill and Derrick Henry have topped out.
Mm-hmm.
This is Derrick Henry because of age and because of carries and because of workload, and Tannehill a little bit because of age, but also I just don't think he's suited to I think he has a ceiling, and
his ceiling limits the ceiling of the Tennessee Titans.
Yes, and when they are good and when things are going well and they have the right matchups and Tim Kelly's in rhythm and even yesterday, almost 270 yards, a lot of drives down the field for Ryan Tannehill. He was force feeding DeAndre Hopkins, who clearly has still got it. There's a lot to like about the offense. They just don't have a high upside ceiling. And the way that Vrabel's going to kind of always be a little bit conservative and maybe lean a little bit more traditional in the style of game, I just think they're limited. And I don't think it's anybody's fault per se, but I think Henry's aging out of the game. At some point, it's going to happen. I think Tannehill's age, but more importantly, I just don't think Tannehill has ever had the skill set to be a top flight modernized NFL quarterback. Frankly, most quarterbacks don't have that skill, but he plays great within the confine of the offense. And if it's open, he can find the guy.
Yeah, it's creating plays out of structure that is the big part of Ryan Tannehill's, I guess you could say, negatives. To me, is that's the first thing. He doesn't create plays out of structure. I want to venture into the red zone eventually, but I want to talk about where I'm at with Ryan Tannehill. Ryan Tannehill is a good quarterback. He is a 60%, 20% is elite, 60% can win you games, and 20% just suck. He's firmly in the 60%. The problem is your surroundings are leaving you behind. And he can only do so much. And when you are in a league that right now, if you want to be considered top flight week in and week out, you have to have your quarterback of the future. And this dipping the toe in the water, half in, half out, with Ryan Tannehill this offseason, with their plans for the future of the quarterback, is coming back to bite them in the ass. And the problem is that unless the Titans are in a position where they are firmly and concretely, like definitively out of the playoffs, they're not going to move away from Ryan Tannehill barring an injury.
Yeah.
And that is where you're at, which hurts the team in a different way because, yes, you can find out certain things about your quarterback's progression behind the scenes. You don't necessarily have to have games. But if you can find them in in-game situations, sometimes people study better than they play or they test, and some people test better than they study. So you're not being able to find out because you have handcuffed yourself to a middling average quarterback, which we have been proponents. Trade them all offseason. Like, this is not new that they should have traded them. But because they have not done that and have taken this half in, half out mentality, it has blown up in their face. And it's probably going to do more harm than good later on down the road. Tannehill's not the issue outside of the Saints game. You can put the Saints game squarely on him. That is that. The Cleveland game is an epic disaster on all levels, and he was mainly one of the better spots of the day, which is not saying much.
No,
but he was one of the better spots of the day. The issues that I have where I feel like his ceiling limits, but when you get into the red zone, and they got into the red zone a lot because of Ryan Tannehill and DeAndre Hopkins' connection. He has a 102.8 passer rating inside the red zone. He has 17 attempts in the red zone.
Is that just this? Is that just this year?
That is this year.
This year?
Yeah. I'm not including anything else. Just this year. So that tells you right there. This year, 17 attempts, 102.8 passer rating. The problem is that they are giving the ball to Derrick Henry in the red zone and turning into a completely different offense where Derrick Henry has 11 attempts for 1.09 yards per attempt. He has gone for 12 yards. And now you may say, but Zach, he probably got a lot of goal line carries inside the 5, 2 out of the 11.
Yeah.
So when they're outside, when they're in between the 10 and 19-yard line, he's got 6 attempts for 0.33 yards per attempt. That's damaging. And the other issue is that inside the red zone, Tyjae Spears has gotten 1 carry, and that 1 carry went for a touchdown. And listen, and it's mainly because Derrick Henry was on the field, but that means you have to get creative with Derrick Henry, and Derrick Henry is almost better used at this point in his career because he cannot create plays out of structure, kind of like Tannehill right now. Maybe a distraction.
Unless he's a quarterback, in which case he's been pretty good in the red zone, Derrick Henry. No, but to your point, I think your entire points are all encompassed into the Tyjae Spears touchdown. Mm-hmm. Because not only was it giving Spears the ball, it was also creative play call and design at the right time. And it was getting a dynamic weapon out in space. It was doing something that, like, it was all different than what you normally see. And I think that one play is sort of all these issues wrapped into one. And like when they, like even 2 weeks ago, they scheme Nick Westbrook-Akine open on a creative play to come into the backfield and get open. And Tannehill makes a good throw. And because that was the design of the play. And Ed says this Tannehill's not the problem, but he's also not the answer.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
I think that's 100% correct. I do think you and I can have a longer conversation about if it does hurt the team as much as you're saying long term, if it's going to do damage. I think that's an interesting conversation we can have, because I remember standing on the practice field on the very first day of practice of OTAs. I remember talking to somebody inside the team, And we were kind of like all looking at Will Levis for the first time, right? It was all of our chances to actually see him on a practice field with like a uniform on and helmet and pads and stuff. And we're all like, man, we're all talking about Will Levis. And I kind of was just chatting with somebody that works for the Titans. I just said, look, this is a pretty decent luxury to compete for a division championship while bringing along your guy and rebuild on the fly is sort of their terminology, which is fine. That's fine. I don't think it hurts them to try to make the playoffs, quote unquote, with Ryan Tannehill as much in the future. I don't know if that really like damages the franchise.
Well, I feel like if what I mean by that is like if you wait to play Will Levis next year and you think that he's something that he's not because you saw him good in practice,
yeah,
and then that's kind of like, oh, that's not very good.
Well, then here's the thing. I still think you can work him in 2 games. It doesn't have to be blowout garbage time. Like you can get him if you think he's really that close to being your starter day 1 next year, and you're moving on from Tannehill, which you and I have kind of largely believed is the case for a long time. You don't have to wait until garbage time or blowouts or an injury. You can just say, look, on the hey, it's a close game, but on the 3rd series of XYZ game, we're having some success. Maybe it's against a poor defense, right? Pick your spots. But you can say like, hey, on the 4th possession, Will Levis is going to start. Now, that would have been like a 3rd quarter of this past game because there's only like 8 total possessions in the first half between both teams. 16-play drive, 10-play drive, 10-play drive, 12-play drive. Just I've never seen anything like it. But you could get these guys in. You can work them in, and you could have the quarterback playing. So I do believe it is a luxury to have Ryan Tannehill compete for a division championship, which I still think they can do, and still bring Levis along behind the scenes, and then on the field a little bit more. I think you can still do all of that, and it doesn't set your franchise back, 3 years or whatever. I think it's more about, can Rand Carthon find playmakers in the offseason? Can he plug holes in the secondary? Can he finish the offensive line rebuild? Like I think there's much bigger things than trying to figure out what to do with the quarterback. Does that make sense? Like he's kind of made his bed. He's kind of made his bed with the quarterback situation at this point.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that's the point, is that decision, kind of like the AJB trade, kind of like picking up, Isaiah Wilson and drafting him, then turning around, drafting everything. The Tennessee Titans seem to have choices because of how they built their team and their philosophy of winning, these choices that can have long-term ramifications or ripple effects, right? Okay, the Patrick Mahomes the Chiefs let Tyreek Hill go. They let a couple of their left tackle go, and they picked up Orlando Brown. Then they put up a bunch of scrubs. Now Orlando Brown's this year, but Juwan James. All this to say that those ripple effects don't necessarily affect that team from putting competent product on the field week in and week out. They may not look like the unbeatable Chiefs every, right. But they still win a Super Bowl without Tyreek Hill when everybody thought that was crazy. Ripple effects for the Tennessee Titans tend to have staying power, and they have to learn to control their destiny a little bit better than what they have.
Let me float a quick theory, because I was watching a lot of games yesterday, and this kind of goes to Tannehill and the offense and Tim Kelly and the weapons and everything else. Like, I'm going to go Jared Goff, Matt Stafford, and Kirk Cousins. I think all solid to above average, but like not elite quarterbacks, right? Probably in the same ballpark as Ryan Tannehill. Some of you probably think Ryan Tannehill's better than those guys. Some of you might think Ryan Tannehill's worse than those guys. For a long time, I would have said Ryan Tannehill's better than Jared Goff. I think Stafford and Cousins are better than Ryan Tannehill. I just think they have more ability. But what those offenses and what those 3 teams have clearly done better than the Tennessee Titans is put people around the quarterback. The weaponry for the Vikings, the weaponry for certainly the Rams, and they weren't all first round picks. Kyron Williams, Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua. Puka Nacua. Why can't I never say his name right? He's on my fantasy team too. Tutu Atwell, who's not a great player, but like provides
suddenly turned into something. I mean, like Van Jefferson doesn't even exist on the Rams, and everybody's talking about Van Jefferson, right?
But like, you go to the Vikings, of course, and you look at all the pieces. Like they put Dalvin Cook around him for a while, and then they're like, nah, forget you. We'll go with Madison. And then we got Jefferson, and we got now they got Jordan Addison, and they found guys to put into the scheme. They modernize their scheme, and then their slightly better than average quarterback has done pretty well. Now, to be fair, the Rams defense, at least before this season and last season, was very, very good. I think if you look at the Lions currently as they're constructed, that was my pick to win the division. I think they're very good on defense. And
Aiden Hutchinson is just a maniac,
and a very similar head coach to Mike Vrabel.
And a super creative offensive coordinator who decided to come back instead of getting a head coaching job, which right now everybody and their mother is going to be falling all over themselves to get Ben Johnson over at the Lions and probably pay him even more money because he is doing insane things every week. He did a direct snap to the running back while Jared Goff was under center.
It's awesome.
Have you ever heard of that? It's ridiculous.
Now, to be fair, their offensive line is fucking sick. So let's just be honest.
And they built that over time.
Over time, yeah.
And I want to say this about the Vikings. The Bill Barnwell put out a quote on ESPN this morning about the Vikings, and I feel like there have been some teams, and the Vikings is one of them, where you could just like Mad Lib it, and you could put the Titans in for the team that they're talking about. So. On the Vikings, it feels like they're stuck in the same game every week where their style of play and limitations lead them to the same frustrating results. That to me is just just like the Tennessee Titans. And at this point, that's what we're going to get. It's frustrating results. I mean, Ed is right. Even I came into the year with low expectations, and Ed says the same thing. So he's not angry, but he's frustrated with the organization's hubris of sticking with the old guard. Mortgage future picks for 2 QBs we haven't seen.
Okay, hang on. You didn't mortgage anything with a 3rd-round pick.
He traded other picks where here's my thing is my problem has always been with how they choose to spend the picks after. Like, it's not, I don't necessarily care that they traded up for Malik Willis, but at the same time, I have to ask you, if the idea has been since 2021 or 2020, whenever this quote came about, we have to be better around Ryan Tannehill, and they have yet to be better around Ryan Tannehill, why should I have any faith that they're going to be better around Will Levis or better around Malik Willis? Now, listen, I'm not completely giving up on Rand, and I'm not blaming Ram Carthon for anything. He's got dealt a tough hand. When you look at the 2020, 2021, 2022 draft classes that are either here or not here, it's not good.
Sure.
And he's got a long way to go, and he was always going to have a long way to go. But the point I always thought about this is that you may have a long way to go, and you may win some games, and you may make it into the playoffs, but it's utterly meaningless until you move away from Ryan Tannehill, Derrick Henry, and some of these other players. You have clung to players that do not help your team in the long run. They are past their prime.
Now, I want to be clear about this because it has been just for you and I, it's been a roller coaster for me to get in here and do the show every Monday, brought to you by Sinkers Beverages and the Kingston Group. But I do think that's some of the nature of the NFL. We overreact and go crazy after every win and every loss. And it does feel like now we're starting to settle into that this is going to be a little bit more volatile week to week than we expected. But I do think this team can, I still think if they lose against Baltimore, they're 2-4, which is what I said they were going to be in the summer. If they had won that game yesterday and, gotten 1/4 and 1, they might be 3-2 and first place in the division and ahead of schedule. So all is not lost here. And Pretty Boy says there's no point. Pretty Boy Lipschitz says there's no point in going 7-10 with Ryan Tannehill. My question is, what does that give you as a fan? Does that mean you're 7-9 going into the last game of the regular season with a chance to win the division? Because then I would say that's the whole, sure, I'm okay with that. To our conversation last year at the end of the season, I think picking 14th and picking 6th, I think you can win championships either way. I don't think it changes the direction of your franchise. And mortgaging the future is going up to number 3 to get CJ Stroud. That's mortgaging the future. Trading up a couple spots to get Will Levis in the 2nd round on the 2nd day and trading up a couple spots to get Malik Willis, those are risks, and maybe they're failures. But it's not quote unquote mortgaging the future for one guy to put your franchise around. I think Rand Carthon, you can look at every one of his draft picks last year and his free agents, and you could say half of them were okay and half of them were meh. There hasn't been an elite hit. I think Skoronski's going to be great. I think he's going to be great long term. Sean Murphy-Bunting has been solid. Daniel Brunskill's been solid. Arden Key's been solid, but I think we saw some limitations with Azeez Al-Shaair physically, and we know Andre Dillard's limitations. So I think the book on Rand is still way, way, way out. But I think there's a point to going, if you're 7-7 with 3 games to go, that's competing for a playoff spot in a division championship, maybe, unless Jacksonville somehow runs away with this thing, which I don't think is going to happen.
No, because if you, I mean, the Jacksonville, that game yesterday, obviously the Bills were in a competitive disadvantage by,
Injuries.
Jacksonville being able to be there. They suffered so many injuries and had so many calls not go their way. Like, it took everything for the Jaguars to win that game, or for really the Bills to lose. It took a lot. And the Jaguars looked good, but they also looked good against a team that lost a bunch of people. Yeah. I mean, you're throwing to Kyer Elam on Calvin Ridley. You better look good.
Dude, that dude that was great. They were really, really good on third down, for example. The way that
the Bills could not get off the field on third downs.
Sounds familiar, Titans fans. Like, the Colts were really good on third down on Sunday. And so there's lots of different ways to look at this. I just think there is still absolutely, like, if there's no point to going in 7-10 with Tannehill, then I don't think there's a point in being a fan at this point. Like, if you think you've got a chance to compete for a division, and I would say they still absolutely clearly do, with the schedule lightening up, with the bye week coming, hopefully with Treylon Burks coming back healthy, with younger players developing. I think there's plenty of – we've seen this team, when they're good, they can beat anybody. And when they're bad, they can be really, really bad. That's life in the NFL. I think there's still absolutely a point to writing this all out, seeing what Tannehill and Henry can do, see what Tim Kelly can do with them, and then move on and fight the battle, cross the bridge when you get there next offseason, which is going to be a huge one for Rand Carthon to define his tenure as the GM. But, like, I don't know. I don't know. I think I've seen enough from the pieces that they've got to say that they're capable of winning the division. And if you're capable of winning the division, then you got to fucking write it out. Like, I don't know.
That's kind of how
you can't quit after 5 games. Like,
to me, it's like, okay, they're 2-3 right now. They were 3-2 in 2021. Okay, so if they're 3-3 and they were 4-2 after 6 weeks, let's say they win next week, that's just a 1-game difference from where they were in 2021. And in 2021, they looked just as miserable in their losses as they looked as miserable in these losses. The difference is in their wins. They've scored more points, but they also played less stellar defenses in 2021, and they still had A.J. Brown. But
I mean, look, they beat the Bengals and the Chargers, 2 teams that everyone picked to make the playoffs, and they did it looking very good. So.
I understand the idea that, okay, making it to the playoffs and losing the playoffs, it's nothing big. But taking off the objectivity of it all, as a fan, I do not want to watch terrible football week in and week out. And because if it's terrible football like the football we've seen play, I don't know how long till they're out of the playoff contention and playoff race.
Yeah.
Because the Jaguars are not that good. The Texans have their issues. And then so do the Colts, who looks like they may be without Anthony Richardson for four games. And now, listen, that may not matter. Or more. So there's no telling what it's going to take. Like, and if Ryan Tannehill's like what he has been and they're losing games, he's still going to play. So it's like, if Ryan Tannehill's going to play, I want them to win.
Well,
you know what I'm saying?
I totally agree. Ed says, but this year doesn't matter. We've all seen this movie before, and we know how it ends. I understand that sentiment, and I get it. Z Dean says 3-3 is the outcome most people expected. Only differences are the teams that they won and lost to. I don't disagree with that either. But again, here's what I would say. To your point about as the season unfolds, if the Tennessee Titans get to a place where they're like, I don't know what the number would have to be, but let's say 4 games under 500. Whatever that, whether it's, 2-6 or 3-7 or whatever it is. And the team winning the division, let's call it Jacksonville for now, has a winning record. Even if it's just a game, if they are 5 games back of first place, 4 games back of first place, whatever that number looks like. If we then want to start having conversations about, I'm tired of seeing this movie and I want to see a different ending, that is when you can start to have the conversation about, all right, well, maybe Tajay Spears and Will Levis should be your starting backfield. Like, we can start having that conversation later.
There are players who are giving their all week in and week out, and there is that element to it that, like, to say that it's to say that, like, I just want them to lose and just find out what they have. I mean, you're kind of like leaving out the fact that, what is that going to say to Jeffrey Simmons? What does that say to, even if you don't think Derrick Henry's good like I do, you still want some success for Derrick Henry, right? Like,
Sure,
I mean,
sure.
it's just, it's a delicate balance to want something, but to understand that, like, because I am with the majority of people in the fact that I do think this is a waste of year. I've thought about that the whole time. And this is why I wanted Ryan Tannehill to get traded. I want Derrick Henry to get traded. I wanted them to go up and get Anthony Richardson or even CJ Stroud. Go up and get your guy, whoever that may be, and let them play now. And they did.
Turn the page. Yeah.
And that's where we're at. And the problem is that's where you're going to be at all season long for the most part, unless things really go off the rails. And then when things go off the rails, things tend to get a little bit worse than just the benching of a quarterback. Maybe you don't care that they lose Mike Vrabel, but there's a good chance that Mike Vrabel could get fired if things go terribly off the rails like everybody wants it to. There's a good chance that Will Levis sucks and you're in an even worse position than you were, because now you're going to have to spend a third pick in a row on a quarterback. Maybe that turns out to be Drake May and it's really good for you. And maybe that's Caleb Williams. I don't know. But you don't.
Is it weird that I don't even count Malik Willis as like a drafted quarterback? Anybody in the third round or later, like I almost don't count it as that.
Like they didn't.
You're throwing a dart. You're trying to hope that you hit pay dirt because the risk is worth the reward.
Yeah.
Or vice versa. The reward is worth the risk. To me, that is not a factor in like the future decision making. The Levis thing is different. You traded up to 33rd pick to get a guy that you thought graded out as a top 15 player. Like that is a little bit different. So, and a different guy made the decision.
Maybe the tank thing works out for you, but there are plenty, and it's not really tanking. It's just that you guys, the Tennessee Titans, just can't fucking win games. I don't think it's on purpose. But maybe it works out. But like, to me, it could work out, but the greater chances is that you end up firing Mike Vrabel. You end up getting some wonder kid that doesn't work out or isn't really good.
Yeah.
You don't have a quarterback, and then you draft a quarterback and they can't develop that quarterback, and you're back in a big, long rotation of just having really, really awful teams to watch. I mean, you look at the Bengals between Andy Dalton and Joe Burrow. That was a little bit. It wasn't long, but that was long enough to where you're just like, God dang, it's pitiful. Now, listen, right now it's still pitiful kind of for the Bengals right now because they have a poor offensive line and they're making weird moves as well, and their defense isn't that great. Like, it's just always the grass is always greener on the other side is what everybody thinks, but I don't know. I have a hard time right now, whether they win the playoffs or don't make the playoffs, seeing this style of play or changing very much, or this
well, but here's what's crazy:
the difficulty of degree to which they play football. I don't see that changing.
the weekly
maybe that's
struggle,
a better way. Yeah,
the weekly struggle to finish the 60 minutes. No, because I think number one, I think anything that a fan feels right now in terms of projection of the season, I think is warranted, and I understand. If somebody says, man, and a lot of you guys in the comments are saying this, if a lot of you guys are like, man, I've seen the movie before, I don't understand, I don't like it, I'm tired of watching it, let's be sellers as soon as we've lost a few games. Let's hope that keeps Mike Vrabel around and we move on from Tannehill, et cetera, try to get draft picks, build for next year. Like, I get that emotion, I get that feeling, and I know why people say it. I also understand someone saying, look, we're 5 games in. We've got 12 more to go in a winnable division with a veteran quarterback and a Hall of Fame running back. Like, let's go at it, guys. Let's make a run at this. Because I think there is enough from the offense with Tim Kelly. I can't believe I'm saying this after our conversation when they hired Tim Kelly, that like the thing that gives me the most hope about the team is Tim Kelly. Like, it is Tim Kelly mixed with Chig and Spears and Kyle and a healthy Burks and DeAndre Hopkins, who's a legitimate bona fide receiver. Like, they have things to use, and a guy who apparently knows how to use them. That should give people excitement because it's not a thing we've seen before from this organization, at least not since like that 2019 magical, mystical, fairy dust,
the Art Smith years,
the fairy dust year. And so, like, I get everyone's emotion in all of this. I don't think you got a lot of pieces on this team that you're going to trade at the deadline to recoup first, second, third round picks.
No, I don't. Let me say something. I don't.
You might get some fourths and some fifths, but that's about it.
Right. Like PK put out that Christian Fulton has no trade value, and I vehemently disagree because just 24 hours earlier, you saw Chase Claypool get traded. Chase Claypool, who is a worse wide receiver than Christian Fulton is a defensive back. And then listen.
Yeah. That's mean-spirited, Zach.
Well, I mean, he is worse.
I know.
But, like, sure, it's a 6. You upgraded your 7th round pick to a 6th round pick. Okay, sure. Maybe that means nothing to you, but the Titans would have to be willing to take a bath on some of these trades, and get mediocre returns. But sometimes mediocre returns can turn into different things. So I feel like there are players that have value, but right now, not the value they see. I don't know if you saw it. I retweeted it because it was hilarious. I don't know where it ended up. Maybe I could find the poll while we're talking. But it's Turf Show Times, which is the Music City Miracle version of the LA Rams. So Music City Miracles for SB Nation. This is Turf Show for Turf Show Times for SB Nation. They put out a poll. Should the Rams trade for Derrick Henry? 35% said yes. Other fan bases already know that Derrick Henry should not be traded for. 65% out of 1,600 people voted no.
Kyren Williams is okay.
Their fan base does not want Derrick Henry, and I would guess that it would take maybe some fan bases to I don't know what fan base that would have 1,500 people that would vote yes on a majority besides Tennessee Titans, and look where it's gotten you.
So Stoney says this. Hey, listen, we like Tim Kelly. Imagine a quarterback that can create when the play breaks down in this system. And I would put there's two big things, and be able to orchestrate the offense before the snap. Like the quarterback has to be able to get out of the play as well. And we don't fully know how many times he does or does not do that. I would argue that I don't think he does it enough. I thought that last year. Here's the thing, and I'm going to use my I rarely do this on the show, but I want to include my Packers fandom in this conversation because I want you to know that I'm with you on this, Titans fans, because my dad and brother and cousins and everybody, like, they're all worked up about Jordan Love. Jordan Love is, putting up big numbers. They're winning games. He's made the great comeback against the Saints.
Just hasn't been very efficient.
My issue with Jordan Love, and it is 4 games into his career, so let's just, starting career, I should say. It's like 48 months into his career, but like, you know what I mean? My dad and I were on the phone and he was asking me a question about, oh, he looked great on the goal line on that quarterback's that run where he got into the end zone, and I go, that was inside the confines of the offense. My question about Jordan Love and what I don't like about watching Jordan Love through, granted, 4 games, is that he is great when the play unfolds the way it's supposed to. And he can see it and he can execute it and his arm's good enough to get it to where it needs to be. But when the play breaks down, I am used to watching the greatest pre-snap quarterback maybe of all time other than Tom Brady and one of the greatest improv quarterbacks of all time in the history of the sport, and Aaron Rodgers. So I'm spoiled. But Jordan Love doesn't do any of that shit. He doesn't yet. And again, he's young. Tannehill is Tannehill. He is established. Right. But I said that to my dad and he was like, what do you mean? And I go, when the angle route on the running back is there, he hits him. But when he's covered, you got to make something happen. And the great quarterbacks can play off schedule. They can change the play. They can do little things at the line. They can make an arm slot adjustment. They can tweak this. They can tweak a delivery. And I just haven't seen that from Tannehill ever. And I haven't seen it from Jordan Love. And so it doesn't mean you're terrible. It doesn't mean you're going to be a bad quarterback. But it means you're probably not going to be elite.
You're not in the 20%. And right now, I mean, it's still just, to me, it's just Patrick Mahomes and everybody else. Like, as far as
Joe Burrow,
I don't know. Good. He's having a real hard, and maybe it's just the injury, but he's having a real hard time with stuff. I'm not.
He looked pretty damn good yesterday.
Like, yeah, well, it's against the Cardinals, so I know everybody started believing in the Cardinals and stuff. But
I agree. You're absolutely right. But the offensive line and the injury, he got beat all to hell against the Titans.
He's probably elite. I'm probably just being down on Joe Burrow just because I don't like Joe Burrow. But
I think Justin Herbert's pretty good. Oh, ironically, two guys the Titans have beaten.
Yeah, Herbert's he's not near elite yet. He's gonna have to put together winning games, like clutch performances, and that's the difference between, I think, Patrick Mahomes and everybody else. Is like Patrick Mahomes could be down. Listen, when the Tennessee Titans were down yesterday and they had a minute left or whatever, I was like, well, this game's over.
Right.
Because
Even
there's
the broadcast,
Patrick Mahomes, right?
Even the broadcast said it. They were like, well, they can't do play action on this drive, so they're probably not going to do anything. They were so good in play action yesterday. To kind of wrap up our Titans therapy session here, they were so good in play action, which is, again, should be something you can go, look, this is something we can do. This is the modernization of the offense, play action on first down. They used it extraordinarily well to DeAndre Hopkins yesterday with Ryan Tannehill. I think all of his production came on play action, basically. It was great. But as soon as they got into the 1 minute and 10-second offense, there was nothing there. The offensive line wasn't as good. The receivers weren't as good. The quarterback wasn't as good. The system didn't work. And it does take a special quarterback to run 2-minute drills. That's it. It just takes a guy that knows how to do it. So I don't know what else we accomplished today.
Well, I mean, we're just analyzing what the Titans did yesterday and where they're at, and talking about what their future may hold. I mean, there's just a lot of questions with no answers, and that's just how the Tennessee Titans are going to be until they can show that they can string together wins.
Yep. And
they haven't been able to string together wins in back-to-back performances in a very, very long time.
Yeah. Can even out the ebbs and the flows. The roller coaster needs to come to a kind of a glide, and if you can do that, and find a little balance between your offense and defense from week to week, again, I think you can absolutely win the division. I think it's too early for people to be talking about selling everybody at the deadline, and Vrabel has shown you the ability to bounce back. This is another one of those challenges.
And listen, don't forget 2019 when they went to the AFC Championship game, they were 2-4, and they came back and they went there. I mean, it happens with this team all the time. Things feel a little bit more hopeless, and I get it. I fully understand the fans that are thinking this way, because there is no quarterback behind Ryan Tannehill that is as good or as experienced as Ryan Tannehill was when he came in for Marcus. This defense is very up and down, but the defense has been up and down the entire time under Vrabel. And it's probably one of the more talented defenses, to be honest with you. I also look at, Tajay Spears and DeAndre Hopkins, and, I see stuff that can be put together where they can string wins with Tim Kelly, similar to 2019 and 2020, but it's just going to look a little different, but they have to find their footing fast. And I don't know if a quarterback change fixes anything. I kind of do feel like the Titans would still be sitting at 2-3 right now, even with Malik Willis and with Will Levis, just because I think they would have won a different game and would have lost a different game here and here. But I don't think that the long-term prospects are the same as with Ryan Tannehill. So it just depends.
And look at the schedule coming up. You don't think Baltimore fans are having the exact same conversation today?
Yeah, they didn't even beat the Steelers yesterday. They looked horrendous.
They looked terrible. And the Steelers, by the way, didn't look any better.
Yeah, they're terrible too.
The defenses both look solid, but they'll and by the way, they're both on the schedule coming up. Atlanta needed a last-second field goal at home to beat Houston. They've got a quarterback who's okay, fine. They've got some nice pieces, but the schedule's there. So if they're 2-8, I'm going to have a different thing to say on the show, and we can have a different conversation. But you all need to have a different conversation if they're 4-3.
Yeah.
Because if they are, then we're talking about a different team. And so we're not there yet, guys. We're just not there yet. There's some stuff to like. There's some
I don't
stuff
think
to
you're going to
really
see any kind of sweeping changes this week unless they decide to go ahead and put in NPF, which they made him inactive last week and put him in. I don't know where they're going to put him in at, but either one's probably an upgrade at this point, but likely left tackle, which is where he practiced last week, which was eye-opening. But if the roster coming out of the bye doesn't look tweaked, like if Christian Fulton is still in and he has a bad game in London, he's still in. If Andre Dillard and NPF is still riding the bench after the bye, then yes, we
Yep.
got a lot to talk about with this
Yep.
coaching.
Yeah,
And
that's fair.
then, and for right now,
That's fair.
I feel like it's I'm the same as where I have been. It's likely a playoff team, likely losing the first round, but we're getting close to finding out what this team really is. I just don't know how long that's going to be a good thing or a bad thing.
Yep. I tend to agree. I think I had him at 8 and 9. I might have dropped it now to 7 and 10, but that's really not all that different. So we shall see, folks. We shall see. Sinkers Beverages, the Kingston Group, 2 great sponsors, of course. We really appreciate them supporting us. So you guys should all go support them. Sinkers Beverages, of course, sign up for the in-crowd. Great selection, great staff. One of the best liquor stores in the city, voted the best liquor store in the city last year. So you can Uber Eats, search the Sinkers Beverages. They'll send the booze directly to your house. Of course, the Kingston Group, buildkg.com, an award-winning custom home and remodeling firm in town. So make sure you go check that out. Zach, what do you got at Stacking the Inbox and F-Words this week?
Today,
promote your stuff.
Today, at basically stackingtheinbox.com, I wrote all about Christian Fulton, went in depth in his struggles and what they need to do. Obviously, put more Molden on the field, or maybe even try Valdor outside, something different than Christian Fulton, who's just not getting it. I talked about the terrible run defense, talked about Ryan Tannehill, basically stuff that we talked about today, but a little bit more in depth in certain things. And, I just kind of asked where Arden Key's been. Where's he been?
Yeah, it's a couple games now.
Yeah.
So there you go. Football and other F-words, of course. And we'll talk to you later in the week. Otherwise, thank you guys for hanging out with us. All you guys in the comments, we do appreciate it always and every time. So please rate, review, subscribe. Check out the 440 Sports YouTube page. Give us a subscription there as well. We do appreciate your support and for listening. For Zach, I am Braden. We'll talk to you guys later this week.